Knock, knock.
Who's there?
It's Steve Cockram.
Steve, my friend, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. And how are you?
I am very, very good. We have found the optimal location for recording, which is a lot of fun pre-record. Um, we before we dive in, and we're going to hear a little bit more about Steve, and you're going to tell us a little bit more about you. But it was quite an interesting chat we had a couple of weeks ago. You had reached out, and it was a really we just hit it off, and we've got similar backgrounds. We've both been in the industry a long time. We both started around that kind of 17 years old, and kind of into health and fitness. And then we found out, having that conversation we had a few weeks ago, that we were from a very similar area in the UK, although we're both in very different places now. So I thought that was very interesting, and it just shows us what a small world we live in, and how, I think, isn't it, everyone's connected by the maximum of like 7 people or something, which I think is definitely probably true in this case if we dove into it.
It
Um,
seems like it,
yeah, right.
hey.
So obviously, I had the pleasure of hearing a little bit about you, and your kind of background, and what kind of led you to where you are. And obviously, we're going to hear all about that today. But I'd love to just paint a little bit of picture for everybody listening. And not that we need to qualify any of our guests, but sometimes you have to give your little resume and qualify yourself. But just tell
Yeah,
us a little
that's
bit
it,
of
man. Yeah.
the Coles notes of your kind of journey in health and fitness, and and where you are now, and kind of what got you there, I guess.
Sure, yeah. So my kind of bio rundown. All right. So for me, like you said, I'm now 43, and I started in the fitness industry at 17 years old, straight out of college. That's where I wanted to be. Um, Fitness instructing and personal training, really. And my love of fitness developed from there through my rugby as well. Um, and then I guess I got into the gym management side, and I was lucky enough to manage at some great gyms in the UK, some prestigious gyms in London. And I really enjoyed the gym management side. It allowed me to be social, it allowed me to be around high performing athletes, it allowed me to be around people that have real integrity in what they're doing, being a sportsman, but also being a member of staff. When you work in establishments with high esteem, you put yourself on in a performance every day, but you do it for the love of the job, but also the love of the industry that you're in. So I was still personal training and strength and conditioning coaching at that point, along with my gym management. And like I said, it opened me up into dealing with a lot of athletes and getting to know their mindset, which basically was my thing. I was intrigued by their athletic mindset and their sports psychology, and what it was that drove every individual person. And then got to a stage about 4.5 years ago where I thought, you know what, I'd love to go and visit New Zealand. Never been there before. I've heard that it could suit my personality. Went over, came back, and applied for a job, and got a job as a gym manager, but also was well into my sports psychology and my performance mindset by then as well. So, and now I'm a performance mindset coach. And it's great that I've made that transition. It was always going to happen, but also being in the right area to have it, because Wanaka has got such a high performance background and high performance kind of status within New Zealand that I'm lucky enough to find myself here.
Yeah. And it was so funny to hear that, because when we were booking a time to record, and I saw it was in New Zealand time, I was like, oh, that was interesting. And then we logged on the call, and I was like, well, that's not a Kiwi accent. I'm very
Definitely
aware
not.
of a Kiwi accent from many years, and many of the listeners will know that already. That both myself and Nikki spent some time in New Zealand, and it has a very fond place in our hearts. So yeah, it was good to connect and hear that other people are off there roaming around the world doing their thing in the world of health and fitness. It's not just me. So that's awesome. Yeah, and I love that. And I've had, I would say we'll use the term kind of general population people for the majority of my career. However, having seen some athletes, in kind of the sporting athletes, and also lots of fitness competitors, and having those conversations, I can definitely agree that there is a different approach. There's almost like a totally different wiring in the brain, right, to how those people, because it's sometimes unbelievable how well somebody can go about what's needed to be done to be able to perform at the highest level. And it's quite fascinating. And I have some friends that compete on pro circuits for bodybuilding, and it's just incredible and you just see what their lifestyle is like, and it's kind of unbelievable a lot of the time. So yeah, I can definitely agree on that, and I'm sure we're gonna hear a whole heap about that today. I'd love to start now. You obviously mentioned, I know that neuro-linguistic programming is a big part of what you do. The psychology of athletes and mindset, and what we're going to kind of dive into today is how they guess they cross over to everyday life. So you're going to hear a lot of stuff on the show today that's probably going to resonate with with wherever you're listening from and whatever place you are on your journey. But we're also going to see how this is, although athletes are sometimes wired a little bit differently, similar things affect similar, in scenarios, whether it's a health and fitness journey you're on and you've never walked step fit in an exercise facility, or you're a professional athlete. So I want to really start that with something that's come up a lot for me actually the last couple of weeks on coaching calls and, in conversations, is people's barriers to exercise. And also I guess the athletes' barriers as well, right? Because no doubt you work with a lot of athletes that have those barriers. And I think about how often I hear directly or indirectly, when you read between the lines, that people feel like they're not enough. They've got imposter syndrome, and they're bothered about other people's opinions, and all the things that we hear, and they're just kind of psychological barriers that come up. So I'd love to just take a dive into that, and I guess your kind of thoughts, a bit of an overview, I guess, of barriers from your, amazing kind of knowledge and skill set. And then we can dive into how we overcome these.
Yeah. So for me, we talk about the everyday Joe, and we're all that, prime sporting athletes are the everyday Joe as well. They've come from a certain position and a certain place where it's their personality that is, evoked that imposter syndrome. It's their personality that has actually gone, oh, I don't know if I'm good enough. That's my barrier. But actually, I know that I'm good enough. I just don't have the confidence to keep performing at that level. And when people start on a fitness journey and they go into the gym for the first time, it's probably taking them 6 months to get through those doors, or at least a couple months to think about what they want to achieve, how they're going to get there, and where do I start? And for me, when you're attacking barriers and challenges, the first thing is to manage your expectations, and sports, high performing sports athletes have those expectations, which they get put on by coaches, but also themselves. But in realism, when they're preparing for a World Cup, the Olympics, whatever it might be, that's a process of 4 years. So let's be, really realistic with our expectations and understand what we want to achieve in the short term and how it's going to get us closer to a goal in the long term, or a horizon goal. So number one would be breaking down that barrier, almost like a fence. You've got different levels of fence heights. And let's take the first one, first of all, almost like hurdles, they get a little bit higher. So let's tackle the first one, have the expectation that you're going to give your all and work hard towards that goal. And then when we chalk that off, make sure that we acknowledge that what achieving that small goal has given us, which is our confidence, our belief in ourselves, limiting our vulnerabilities that we think we have. And then you're on to the next level. And I think that's really important to understand, that people set their own goals, but they also set their own standards. And when we bring those standards, not necessarily down, but to a level that we can achieve them, and also we acknowledge what we're achieving along the way, we then get that resilience and that confidence, which breeds our ability to come out of our comfort zone and go into our fear zone and tackle the next object, or obstacle, should we say.
Yeah, that's really powerful, and it that will resonate, I think, with a lot of people that get overwhelmed by the enormity of that goal. And it might be an Olympic athlete at the going to compete in 4 years. It might also be the person stepping in that's totally deconditioned and has never exercised, or the person that needs to lose 100 pounds or whatever it might be. Sometimes it's such a daunting thing, right, when they walk into that. And then what happens is, I guess, we go in with that expectation that this is going to happen, and sometimes we set ourselves a goal that, well, maybe it'll take a couple of months, but we're in reality it might be a 2-year long journey, and they just lose forward momentum, right? And that comes from all the things that you said. And I see this all the time, and I talk about this with my clients. I'm like, can we just check in once a week? And when you check in, just give me one tiny little thing you're going to work on, and then do that this week. Maybe it's getting up, 15 minutes earlier. Maybe it's just moving twice a day or whatever it might be. And then celebrate that. One thing you said was so important is celebrate those things, because that's what gets that forward momentum and keeps people being motivated to continue on that journey, right?
Yeah, that's very true. And one thing we've got to remember as well is, if you don't celebrate it and you don't acknowledge it yourself, no one else is going to. Because we see it in the gym every day. You go in there, people have got their earphones in, they're in their own world. And with all due respect to everybody, no one cares about your journey. So you've got to care about it. Okay. So giving yourself that acknowledgement and the pat on the back and the well done, and the achievements is a great way for you to look back and go, hey, this is what I achieved last week. And this is where I want to go this week. And like you just said, just one thing, getting up 15 minutes earlier and making your breakfast when normally you fly out the door with a piece of toast or nothing, for me is huge, because you're starting to change routines and starting to change processes. And when we do that, we set ourselves up for success rather than failure, because we're built from the bottom platform, the lowest rung, and then we pile things on top. But those things on top are built with great, solid foundations.
Yeah, I was literally just coaching this morning, and I kind of wrapped up the session, and it was a group session. I just said to everyone, hey, do me a favor, like when you log off today, just take 60 seconds to just celebrate one thing that you felt really good with today, one thing you felt like you succeeded. Maybe you got, that one push up on your toes, or you got, through a set without having to take a recovery that maybe you couldn't do last time. And I said, it's so easy to focus on all the things you didn't do, right? I didn't lose that whole 100 pounds. I didn't work the hardest in the group. I didn't win the race, whatever it might be. It's so inbuilt in us as human beings to want to just celebrate the big thing. I said, well, and I said to him, I was like, that's not going to keep you going. And really, consistency is going to be a big part of getting there. And if you can't keep going, that's probably the biggest reason why people fail or why they quit trying on things.
Yeah. And, if you liken it to nutrition, right? So people are scared of going to a nutritionist or a nutritional advisor, because they think they're just going to rip up their current diet and then hit them with all these healthy things that, one, they don't like, but two, they've got to eat 4 or 5 times a day and they don't feel like they have time. And all these things start to come to the fore. Well, let's break it down and make it easier. Okay. What are you doing really well in your nutrition, first of all? And can we strengthen that? And then we can look at the areas that aren't maybe performing and say, okay, what can we change in the small matter in the next 7 to 10 days that gives us a foothold on our balanced nutrition or whatever it might be? And how does that affect our goals and our wants and the desires? How does nutrition play a part in that? And I think when you start looking at it holistically as well, then nutrition is a great point to start. Exercise is a great point to start, but also that mindset of going, okay, I'm not going to achieve this year, but that's my horizon goal. And if you can do that with nutrition, fitness, and your mindset, you're onto a winner. You're setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, for sure. And it makes me something else that comes up a fair bit when I have these types of conversations, whether it be, on the podcast or, with clients, is the destination that people are looking for. How often do you see, I'll kind of give a scenario, and you can tell me how often you see this with kind of the professional athlete and that kind of mindset is, when we focus on that goal, yes, a long-term goal is important. But what I find with general population and health and fitness is, and I'm sure you've had this as well with general population, is the goal they come in with is very, very rarely where they end up. And that's not to say that I'm a terrible trainer and I've never got anyone to their goal, in case anyone's thinking that. But it just changes. Because they come in and they say, I want to, maybe they say, we'll use weight because it's an easy thing for people to refer to, is I want to lose 50 pounds. Great. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to start with getting you to move a little bit more every day. And we're going to, look at all those things you're doing well in those nutritions and maybe where we can make a few tweaks. And we're going to get you to sleep a bit better and recover a bit better. We're going to start there. It's got nothing to do with that weight. And what happens is, as they go through this journey, they don't ever actually end up getting there. They might lose the weight. They might not. They might find a sweet spot where they settle. But what they realize is that there's so many other things that they uncover that they want. So although the long-term goal is, I do ask the question, I typically don't. I'm like, what do you want to achieve like now in the next couple of weeks? Like, let's start with that and let's talk about that, because this is going to change, and we're going to, that journey is going to change. Is that the same when you're working with a high performance athlete, or is that a different approach and a different kind of mentality?
No, it is very similar. We've got different, or I've got different tools that I use. And, everyone knows about, or maybe not, but the SMART goals that you set out. SMART goals are being specific, being measurable, being attainable, being relevant. What is the relevancy of your goal? What does it mean to you? And also the time bound aspect. And when people put time bound aspect into a goal, they're like, oh my God, I've now got to do this by the goal because everyone knows it. I've already put that goal out there. But actually, there's another acronym that I use, which is the GROW model. And you might be familiar with it, which is, what's your goal, which is obviously the G. The R is what's your reality right now? Where are you right now? Because when you uncover and discover where you are right now, you realize that massive goal is going to be made up of smaller goals or step goals. Then you go to the O's, which is your opportunities and obstacles. What's in your way, but what opportunities do you have or options do you have to tackle it in maybe a different way or do something you've never done before? And also the last one, the W, is for me the biggest one. What willpower do you have? And also, what's the way forward? What is your way forward from here? And when you plan those out, and it doesn't have to be long sentences or paragraphs, it can be just be really focused statements. And I do this with the professional athletes as well, and my sporting athletes, because sometimes they come in with no sense of the reality that they're in. And sometimes we need to be grounded and have that accountability to say, hey, this is where I think I am. In reality, this is where I am. And if I'm a novice, that's okay, because now I've got a path in front of me that I can just fill in the blanks with. And sometimes that's very powerful, just taking people back to the beginning. Yeah, and I think that works for me because I have conversations around it, and I use a whiteboard like an old school teacher. I'm up there and I get them to list it, and then I send the photo to them and I ask them for their comments and their feedback, even though we've discussed it in the session. So that actually it's not just about saying it once and writing it down once, it's about actually believing it and going through that process and being clear on what your actions are. I think that gets missed sometimes. With general population, if I can call them that, it's exactly the same.
Yeah, I really like that. I've actually never heard that in all my years, and I really like that idea. And the big bit that stands out for me there is the reality. And in the SMART goal, we often use the R for the realistic, right? Like, is it a realistic goal? But I like the word reality, and the reason being is actually something I was talking about a couple of weeks ago on a group coaching call. Was there's a lot of sacrifices to be made within certain goals. Like, somebody comes to me and says, I really want to be like magazine cover lean. I'm like, all right, let's start. Like, I'm not going to try and put you off, but let me run down the 15 things you're going to have to sacrifice in your life if you want to be magazine. Like, I've been magazine cover lean. It's not fun. However, if it's purposeful and it's your job, and we talk about this in nutrition coaching a lot, is the kind of levels of clients. And I always look at clients as level 1, level 2, level 3. Like, a level 1 client is 99% of people, right? They just need habit forming behavior. They need to understand how to eat sustainably for them, so it's sustainable for their life and their longevity. Eat well. Most people are in that bracket. Then you've got your level 2s and your 3s. Now, your 3s are fitness models. They're people that their physique is what they're paid to do. I'm like, sure. They have to sacrifice so much. Like, they're not going out and enjoying family meals. They're not doing all these things when they're near competitions and photo shoots. And the reality is, somebody goes, oh, well, I don't really want to sacrifice all those things. I'm like, well, that's if you want to be, cover model lean, that's what you have to do. Like, those people are paid to do that. That's why they look like that. And then people go, oh, maybe I should stop looking at Instagram to when I set my goals and maybe be more realistic about it. So I really like that. And I think if that's after they said, this is what I want to do, the first thing you go to is, what's the reality of being there? Like, what have you got to do to get there? Because then people are like, oh, well, maybe I'm going to change my mind a little bit, which is perfectly fine, because we're okay to do that, right? And change our mind and reset those goals and find something that's more of the sweet spot.
Yeah, it's a perfect grounding, really, because, somebody who's not confident and goes, oh, I'd really like to be here, but I know I'm here. They've got a good grip on that reality. But also, the reality is, if they put these processes in 2 to 3 weeks, you can start becoming a different person altogether. Your behaviors will change. Your routines, your processes, your enjoyment of exercise will change. Your health on the inside and the outside will change. Your vision of the world outside will change, because now you feel healthier. Now you see it from the eyes of someone who actually feels healthy rather than someone who wants to feel healthy. And you know, when you it's quite funny actually, when you use the reality with some of the sportsmen and sportswomen that I train or coach, you know, their light bulb moment is that the penny's dropping all the way down to their feet. And it's just like, okay, so I'm here and I know where I'm competing, but actually on a lot of other things, my reality is I'm quite a novice and beginner at these things. So I need to now build myself up and build goals or identify goals that encompass holistic things and transformational things, not just what I call transactional things, which are things that can be achieved, you know, in 12 to 14 weeks, whatever it might be in nutritional fitness. Let's have a look at something that actually over 3 to 4 months is going to make you a much better competitor, much better person, but also in a much better frame of mind to tackle goals.
I absolutely agree, and I love that things can change our kind of the way we view the world and everything that's kind of out there. It makes me think about something I talk about a fair bit, more in the kind of personal development realm, I would say. But I've noticed recently how this really crosses over when we're looking at, like you said, those transformational things, those things where we really change our relationships with exercise and nutrition and, you know, or our sporting performances and, you know, the successes and the failures, is something I refer to as kind of our personal ecosystem. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on when someone's stepping into something, and we'll use health and fitness because, you know, general population as an example, is somebody steps in and one part of their ecosystem, if you like, their personal ecosystem, is their nutrition, right? And their well-being that comes in nutrition. Then they've kind of got like their exercise, or let's just call it well-being overall. But then they've also got things like their career, their finances, their family, their community, you know, the social side of it. And in my opinion, when you look at personal development, there's too many systems and things out there that focus more on one thing. So like improve your health and fitness and everything changes. I'm like, true. However, if one area of your ecosystem is degrading, like, you know, you're not working on your financial health or your relationships are poor, but you're in great shape, eventually it's going to start corroding the other pieces. And I believe that we have to really look holistically. And I'm noticing that in coaching, I'm having to coach people on their communication and their community and what they're doing, because it's affecting it. And I'm starting to see that. Is that something that, do athletes need to maybe be a bit more single-minded, or are they still also having to get that whole ecosystem in balance for them to be able to perform at their best?
Yeah, great question. I love that ecosystem. It's completely true, and it refers to the body and the brain perfectly. So for me, when athletes look at themselves, they've been in an environment where they're concentrating on themselves and their training and their nutrition. And even if they're a father or a husband or whatever it might be, or wife, or, you know, or an athlete that's performing by themselves, they've still got to take care of other people in their environment. So looking at things holistically, you know, you can talk about imposter syndrome and what they're feeling inside, or you can talk about feeling excluded from a community because they are so insular with their training, you know, and they've got the Strava effect, you know, where they're looking at everybody else's results and they go, oh, I don't deserve to be here, or, you know, oh, I'm up in 3rd or 4th place this week, or whatever it might be. Those sort of things need to be stripped away for me. You know, I'd much rather tell one of my clients for 2 weeks, come off Strava, don't take a watch with you, and sort of like put it in your backpack if you've got a check, and just be yourself during training. Because I think athletes, what they do is they create this sporting identity, and sometimes it strips away their personality from it. So, you know, I'm all for creating sporting identities that take you to a place where you can focus, concentrate, you know, have complete control, and, you know, give it your best performance. But also, you know, nobody wants a robotic athlete. So let's put that personality back in. And first and foremost, sportsmen and women who are elite are still different personalities. They're their own person, and they're all made up of different things. So holistic training for me is vital, absolutely vital.
Yeah, I love that, and I feel like that's a a really smart way to approach it. So, kudos to you for doing that, because I have experienced different things in sporting environments and with people that have come to me from an athletic background where it is just so focused on that single-mindedness, and I appreciate that that's important in some respects. When you're competing, it's important, but and the reason why I asked that, I think it's so important, is I was playing around with a bit of a concept, and I spoke about it when I was recording a podcast recently, and it was kind of, try and word this just right, is we're all good at the good days, right? As an athlete, yeah, right, we're all good at the good days. And my whole kind of theory that I was playing around with is, how do we get better at the and I hesitate to use the word good and bad, but let's, for simplicity, good days and bad days, optimal or less optimal. How do we get better at dealing with the bad days, right? The less optimal days. And what I was talking about was how it's the ecosystem thing again. When we show up and our business is not running very well, we can use metrics and we can, look at history, and it leaves clues and all those things. However, if I'm doing really, really good and I show up and I'm a great dad, and I'm an excellent partner, and, maybe I get my workout in and I feel great and my nutrition's on point, my business might have a bad week, but I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Here's all these other things that are going really, really well. And I can look a bit more, I guess, a bit more objectively of the whole thing. And I think the same maybe with an athlete too, right? Like, if they're having a good day, they're going to perform really well. They're having a bad day, if everything they know and everything that revolves around their life is just their sport and their activity, then everything's gone to shit, right? Because that's all you've got. Whereas if everything else is going well. So I think that's a great way to continue them on that journey and get them through the not so optimal days of training and competing.
For sure. And I think if you can, and what I love about professional athletes and their attitude is, like, when they are I love it about them. This is one of the things that they do, after a great session, what we would deem as a great session, they're so harsh on themselves about the small technical things, and they don't call it a great session. Well, have you performed to your optimum? Yeah, but this didn't go right. But have you had a great performance today? Well, good, but not great. Okay, what would make better? And then you can start diving into where their mind is. And for us, as the general population, we try every day to live up to a great performance. But that could be a great performance in fitness and health, as a dad, in our relationships, as a sportsman, as a businessman. We're performing every day in 5 or 6 categories. And if one of those is off, what we do is we concentrate on that one that's off. We're like, I don't feel myself today in the gym. But actually, you've been home, you spent time with your kids, you've been a great partner, you've been to the office, you smashed 10 sales, whatever it's going to be. But that day hasn't been right because your workout wasn't good enough. Good enough for who? And that's where we go, okay, this isn't my best workout, but I'm going to get the most out of what I can. So I think we just need to be a bit kinder to ourselves, and also make sure that we're effective during that day rather than efficient and ticking off lists. I think that's massive.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And there's always going to be a balancing act, right, of all those things in the ecosystem of life. And it's not always going to be optimal on everything. And sometimes it's really hard to be optimal on everything at the same time, like that. Especially if you've got a lot going on and you've got many different roles you need to fulfill within that ecosystem. It becomes challenging. So you've got to accept that there's days where it won't be the most optimal. Like, I'm not the best parent every day of the week, every month of the year, right? I do my best to try and perform, well in that role, but it doesn't always work out. And if my head's really fully in business, sometimes I'm not as engaged as I could be, and vice versa, right? I might be some days I might be like, tomorrow we've got an education worker strike in Ontario, and I'm going to be home. So there's not going to be a lot of business happening, and I know I'm not going to have an optimal day running our business. But I'm going to be able to hang out with my kid all day and do a really good job at that. And sometimes there's that. You've got a bit of trade-off, right? So
I think what's interesting, what you said, is we know from sports, and general population will know as well. There's an optimum performance level, right? So you have a peak, and then you have the down. So the down peak is going to be that down at the bottom, you have a meltdown. And also on the other side of that peak, so we're starting off here, is boredom and lack of interest. So we need to get to optimal peak. And that sits around about 80%, of our greatest performance. If we can maintain that through a tennis match or going to the gym, whatever, then we're quite happy because we can consistently achieve that. You think about all the other facets of life, that every day we need about 6 graphs to measure us to perform an optimal performance on that one, optimal performance on that one, optimal performance on that one. And it's just going to come back down to 1's not going to be optimal performance or 2's not going to be optimal performance. But what can we do to make sure that it's a good performance and maybe put something in the bag for tomorrow that'll make it a great performance? So let's be a little bit kinder to ourselves. We've got a lot to juggle.
Yeah, and I think as well we could and I struggle with this kind of statement a little bit sometimes. I go back and forward on whether I believe it or not, but I guess we have to know that good is good enough, right? Like if 80%, if you can hit all those bits of that ecosystem at 80%, you're doing a hell of a lot better than the vast majority of the humans on this planet.
Yep.
Maybe that's enough.
And you'll perform 9 times out of 10 in all of those areas if you get that consistency right. Okay. So, like I said, let's just have a look let's scratch the surface and understand what we've got going on in our lives. And if one day your nutrition's not right, but 4 of the other things are okay, then tomorrow's going to be a different day. And that's when you can sort it out. So we need to acknowledge it though, and accept it. That hasn't been our best day maybe, but also then use that as fuel for the next day. So,
yeah, a bit of self-awareness, right, around those things. I think is so important.
Sure.
And it was. I actually sent a message to one of my nutrition clients today, and I'm going to paraphrase because I can't remember exactly what I wrote, but it was something along the lines of, it's okay to feel anxious around food choices sometimes, and I get that there's things happening and there's changes and there's things that you're not used to and there's different conflicting information that you might have had in the past. I said, but listen, one day or one meal of something a little bit different that doesn't work out doesn't dictate results and success, because it's one day or one meal, right? It's going to be what you do consistently, to your point. And I said, look, it's okay, feel a little bit anxious. I said, but nothing's going to, like, the world's not going to implode because we didn't get it just right. We're going to have to tweak things. It's a process. We're trying to find your sweet spot, not for now but forever, and that's important, right? And it's finding that in that consistency. Would you say that people, the general population, or the majority of humans, maybe not understanding that, like, optimal curve that you talked about is a big reason why we see such a drop off in people's health and fitness journeys, right? We all know the January rush. We've both worked in gyms a long time. It gets busy in January, mid-January, and then by March it's quiet. Is it people's mindset of, I must do it at 100%, all in, I have to be getting results, I have to be getting bigger, musclier, I have to be losing weight every single day, or I just drop off because what's the point? Is that a lot to do with that kind of optimal curve, in your opinion?
Yeah, it is. And I think, just going back to what you said about the New Year's resolutions and everything, when I was managing gyms back in London or 10 years ago, it used to be up to like April, people kept these New Year's resolutions. Then it suddenly became, after 2 or 3 years, that it was end of February. And I was like, what happened to those 2 months there? And why did it change so quickly? But people have so much going on in their lives. They actually start to put time limits that they can be in the gym, time limits on eating breakfast. And we're so time constrained at the moment. I think that's half to do with it. So they want to see results within a certain time. Oh, I've been going to the gym and eating healthy for 4 weeks. Why have I not lost weight? Or why does my bum still look fat in this? That's an old adage. But actually what's happening is their demographics are changing, and they can't even see them, and the muscles are getting so much healthier with much more blood flow, whatever it's going to be, but they can't see that. So it's all about the visual. And I do believe that, number one, setting those expectations. They expect in 3 or 4 months to look like this, or to have lost this much weight. Okay, but they're trying to do it by themselves as well. And I do think there's something that, if you've got a goal, and it might be in January or it might be somewhere else, then if you're going to invest money into your own growth as a person, I would say invest in a really good nutritionist, personal trainer, whatever it's going to be. And I'm not blowing the trumpet because I'm in that industry. I really think that people with knowledge and experience will be able to get you through everything that you're struggling with, but also they'll be able to see things that you don't see, which can then be those massive positive points that you're missing and the reason why you stop going to the gym. And then people also put loads of pressure on themselves to achieve it by that time-bound goal. In their head, they've written it down, but does it make sense over the measurable, attainable, relevancy, and the time-bound? No, it doesn't make sense. It's quite specific because they'll go, I want to lose this much by this time. So specific and time-bound for sure, but all the bits in the middle, they kind of missed out. So I think that's half the reason as well. So there's a number of things, I think.
And ironically, when they're setting a goal, they jump over the middle part, which is what most people try to do with their progress in everything in life, is go, well, I'm here and I want to be here, so I'm just going to get to there. I'm like, it doesn't quite work like that. And there's no linear.
Let's set the stopwatch now.
And there's not that linear. I made a post about this. I do like to play on Canva and make some creative posts on there. It's a good outlet for my energy. So just
you'll have to teach me because mine are not creative at the moment.
I made a good filter one, the coach filter the other day, which I made with. Anyway, it's a good outlet. I realized that it calms my mind down when I'm being creative. So it's a good little tip, side bonus tip. And what I basically
drew I'll take that one. I'm going to write that down.
There you go.
For me.
It's and I just put these two dots. There was one down the bottom corner of this square and one up the top. And I was like, if you go on this like jaggedy path up and down and you keep moving forward, you keep progressing, you keep celebrating those 80% days, eventually it will look messy. It won't be a straight line to your goal, but you get there. And then what most people do is they've got this and then they go drastic, 100%, all or nothing. Then they drop off. They do that again 3 or 4 times and they end up way either worse off or in the same place they were in before for exactly that reason. Like, it's not linear. You can't just take that massive leap. And it goes back to the whole long-term goal, short-term goal is we're setting that so far and we're trying to leap to it. Like, just leap to tomorrow, get that right, and then go again, right?
Yeah. And I think, the word that I'd use for goals, especially when I'm thinking now about, the whole New Year's resolution thing and everything, is sustainability. Like, it's not sustainable to go 6 days a week and change your diet completely and go 6 times a week to the gym and have your job and be a father and be a good husband. Something's got to give. And what gives normally is like, I've done it for that long. I don't see that many results, so I'll just cut my gym back. Or it won't hurt on my nutrition. I'll just go back to this on there because that wasn't too bad anyway. So when I'm talking to people about nutrition, I give them options. I said, this is the calorific effect of your breakfast is, but you've got 6 ingredients you can put in your breakfast. You choose. It doesn't really matter. But then you don't get bored. You have options. But also, you're accountable then for putting something on your plate that's the same calorific value of everything else. So, sustainability is massive.
Yeah. So there's one other thing that is buzzing around in my brain a little bit, and you kind of touched on it earlier, and I think it's relevant to so many people. I think people's ability to it can be quite intimidating to step into a gym. It can even have this people coming online to train with us, and what we do at the Nock Academy is people are intimidated. They don't feel like they have any confidence, and they don't want to step in a gym. They don't want to start a nutrition program. They don't want to go and see a coach. And they don't feel like they have any confidence. And they're kind of almost saying, I want to feel a bit more confident before I start. And I keep coming back to it. And I actually listened to a book recently, and there was a really good quote in there. And it was, again, I'm going to paraphrase. I'm really good at paraphrasing, apparently not good at restoring the actual information. There's something along the confidence is about our relationship to getting it wrong or failing. It's not our relationship to success, because that's what people are like, well, if successful people are confident, like, that's not really how it works. And it's the kind of reverse of that. And I see this in many people, right? Like, I'm like, it's okay to come in and not get it right. It's okay to fail. It's okay to miss a workout. It's okay to not hit your nutrition. And when we do these things, as you said, give yourself a little bit of compassion and just keep moving forward, because you'll get more confident as you go along. but you've got to be okay with getting it wrong. If you're just trying to get it right all the time, you're never going to try. And it's, I guess, I don't even know if there's even a question there, but anyway, I was thinking about it, and I'd just love to get your thoughts on kind of confidence, and how do we, maybe, if that's a barrier for people, where could we get them over that?
Yeah, awesome. So, there's a great phrase that success is built on 1,000 failures, right? And for me, when you go into a gym, you're not going to know how, if you're an absolute newbie, you don't know how the machines work, right? So you get an induction, someone shows you how to. Well, what if you forget? So the confidence is going back to that person and saying, hey, thank you for the induction. I remember this, this, and this, but can you show me this again? So now you actually get taught again. You get to reaffirm what you thought you knew the exercise was, but again, you're getting taught correctly. And for me, when you fail, or let's call it a different word, when you get set back on our journey, people always say that, you learn so much from setbacks, because you learn how to approach things differently. You learn from where things didn't go right. And so you make sure that it doesn't happen again. So you're almost like giving yourself that resilience, and confidence is built on relying on your skills. So it might be in the gym, it might be nutrition, like your skills for actually following this eating plan and actually being able to work out and go to work as well. So confidence comes from the reliability of your skills. And the more we rely on our skills, the more confident we get. But also, the more confident we get, okay, the more we're willing to come out of our comfort zone and try new things. Let's cross the bridge to our fear zone and then go back into the comfort zone and take something else and drag it across the bridge. So let's rely on the skills that you have. So build some skills of going to the gym, completing one workout that you now feel comfortable with, and then take a challenge, just a small challenge. And then once you achieve that, your confidence and resilience is going to go through the roof. Now things are attainable you didn't think were attainable, but it's got to be baby steps all the way.
I really like that. I'm glad we touched on that, because it's so important that we find those skills. And the other thing that's important to realize is there's a very small percentage of, the population of the world that have just naturally got a skill. And we all have skills for certain things, but to look at something and say, oh, well, I wish I was a bit better than that, or I'm not any good at that, and I should be, is you should be like, you've got to build it, right? Like no one became I didn't become good at coaching the first year I was a coach. I was absolutely terrible. And I didn't literally coach a single person. I showed up and, showed a few people what to do, but that was basically it. But 15,000 hours later, that's a skill that's been mastered, right? So it's someone going into the gym and expecting to get it right and achieve a result in the first, couple of weeks of going. I'm like, you've done no laying down of that foundation of that skill. So maybe it's the confidence is our relationships with our skill or lack of skill.
Yeah. And it's also, feeling comfortable in an environment as well.
Yeah.
Which newbie wants to go in with a full gym full of, really built and toned women and men when it's your first time there? That's one of the first things, or the first thing, that puts people off and makes them turn around. But if you're with a coach that can actually show you the right way to do things, and you do that in your corner, even if you don't feel, that confident in front of everybody else, you go in and put your headphones in and you do those 4 or 5 exercises and start becoming more confident in the way you hold yourself. You're confident on these exercises. You've built a foundation, right? And I think, using the gym analogy all the time, because that's the environment we've been brought up in. I think what you see is people get confidence from the smallest little things. So person A may get confidence from just going to a spin class or an RPM class 3 or 4 times a week. They can't do the sprints, but they can do the hills now. That means I'm getting stronger. So my confidence is building, that I don't feel like a newbie, an outsider in this environment, in that spin class or RPM class. And on the gym floor, now that I know that I've got a program that I'm coming in and I can feel myself getting stronger, my confidence is I'm going to need a new program in the next 6 weeks. And I can't wait, because that's going to push me further. My confidence is that I can go away and do that program knowing that I'm on the path to something else. So, reframing that is massive as well. But again, expectations, that comes into it. But confidence, that's built on what abilities we have. And that's either an ability to deal with things, an ability to not be afraid or feel like you're outside of an environment. But it's also to be yourself in an environment that scares you sometimes.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes is about bravery, right? Like people ask us as like, if you can, it's a brave decision to open your own business. It's a brave decision to, whatever it is. And I would say, look, at no point was I not scared. Like bravery's not being scared. It's not the absence of fear, right? That's the quote. Bravery is not the absence of fear. It's taking action in spite of it. So yeah, it's exactly that, right? Like you just got to say, hey, look, sometimes you just have to make a brave choice, because you won't build a skill unless you make that brave choice sometimes, right? I didn't learn how to run a business until I made a brave choice to do it. And then I was like, oh, I've got no idea what I'm doing. I better figure it out because I need to pay my bills. And then I was like, I need to build.
I feel that, brother.
But then you're right. Well, I got to do this. So how am I going to do it? I don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm not the best at that. Let's be clear. So being able to say, I have to build this skill. I will get better and better at these things. I will learn how to do my banking and my accounting better, even though I'm terrible at it. Like, it's just a process, right? It's no different, like I said, than being a coach. Like the first year I worked as a fitness instructor, I was pretty awful. Here we are 20 odd years later, right? Like all those hours and it builds, and it's just the same when we're on any journey. But if you don't make a brave choice, like I was an overweight teenager that decided to go and get a job as a lifeguard. Like to be quite blunt, like my fat ass didn't belong in the swimming pool. In my opinion, right? Like that was my thought. But sometimes you have to do those things, right? And you have to make those brave choices, so you don't end up eventually where you want to be. It's just hard to see that. Yeah,
and you're exactly right. And I think for me, how do you define bravery? Well, it's different from person to person. But what I would say is that if we can do something that scares us, maybe not once a day, but maybe once a week, or something that we've been thinking about doing, but we really don't think we'll be able to do it, we can pluck up the courage to do that every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, month, or whatever you've got. You can set your own parameters. Then what you've done is just either taught yourself something new or just learned a skill. And we all know that, and this phrase for me, people sort of scoff at it sometimes, but I actually believe it. Knowledge is power. It's so true. So true. If you don't know anything about nutrition, you either go and see a coach or you upskill yourself, you learn about it. And then once you think you know enough, are you confident enough to give yourself that eating plan? No, maybe not. Cool. Go and see that coach and you can discuss them what you know, what they know, and what's best for you. So what's scary about that is actually, I want to learn about this, but I'm actually going to have to speak to a professional. And I don't really want to do that because I want to keep it to myself. So I guess do something that scares you every so often, and you'll be amazed at what you can achieve, which again builds confidence.
Yeah, I love that. I'll share something a really good friend of mine lives by, the quote. You said that people scoff at that, and he was one to say to me, well, I don't really scoff at the knowledge is power, but he made a really good flip on that, which I think you'll like, which is knowledge is actually the ammunition. And if you think of it, as in terms of a gun, like the knowledge is the ammunition, the taking action is pulling the trigger.
For sure.
So, and I was like, that's a really powerful, and I really love that because it takes that and it just expands it a bit, right? So
yeah, I'll use that as well.
Good, write it down, steal it.
I will.
Listen, Steve, can you tell everyone listening, this has been an incredible conversation. I know people are going to want to find out more. So I'm going to put everything in the show notes, but just tell everyone where they can find you, where they can connect with you, where they can just, be inspired by more of the things you're doing. And and obviously I said, we'll throw it in the show notes. Everyone will get it. And if there's anything else you want to kind of finish up and share with before we wrap up the show.
Yeah, no, first and foremost, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me on. It's been great. And, we come from very similar backgrounds, but also I think we have the same mindset around health, fitness, and nutrition and people in general, looking at the people in general. So keep doing what you're doing, my man. I think it's awesome. So for myself, I've got a website, I've got Facebook and Instagram, but what I'd love to do, Gareth, if it's okay with you, is open up 5 to 6 slots for anyone that's listening to give me a call or jump on Zoom with me for a 30-minute free consultation or breakthrough call. And I might just be able to throw some ideas at them that they haven't really thought about that they can put into their own lives. Completely free of charge, just for me to say thank you to you for offering for me to come on the show, but also just to give some of your listeners a little bit of boost up in where they want to go and what they want to achieve. So hopefully they can take advantage of that. And you can book that on my Facebook page, which is Athletic Mindset Limited on Facebook. Or you can go to the website, which is www.athleticmindset.nz, and go through the contact form there. But either way, I'd love to hear from you and try and help anyone out.
Yeah, I love it. That's incredible. Very generous. And yeah, we'll put the Facebook and the website in the show notes, so you can just go over there, click. And if you want to, anyone listening wants to chat to Steve a bit more, and like you said, have a bit of a breakthrough call, and sometimes we all need that. And I think I'd love to kind of finish by saying that this is something that I've figured out in my last kind of 5 years or so, as on the planet, is we all need help, and it's okay to ask for it. So here's your opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. And it might just be one little thing that you say to me. I've written down a couple of things from today, and those could be actually game changers for me. And it might be something that I say, just on the back end of a comment or something that is relevant to one of your listeners' lives or their sporting performance. So, we've all got to take little learning notes from everybody, I think, and just think about it in terms of our own lives as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate your kind words. I appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge. Like I said, we just hit it off on the call, and it just expanded today with even more great knowledge that I know will resonate with a lot of people listening. I'm sure there'll be a few people hitting the skip back button to listen to a few bits again, which I always love when I hear that. So thank you, and also thank you to the listeners. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate when you take time out of your day to listen to what I've got to say and what my awesome guests have to say. If you got something powerful, if something really resonated, or you can think of someone that would really benefit from hearing this conversation or hearing part of this conversation, please share the episode with those people, because the world of podcasting goes around. When we share it, we get these conversations out to more people, and it makes a bigger impact on the world. That is it for today's show. Steve, thank you so much for your time. Again, everyone, thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.